On the morning of January 9, 1961, a group of 18 young African-American civil rights demonstrators, 13 men and 5 women, most of whom were students at Friendship College, a college located in the city limits of Rock Hill, South Carolina, converged on McCrory's 5, 10, and 25-cent variety store in downtown Rock Hill. Authorities had been notified ahead of the time that there would be protests, and by 8:30 that morning they were on duty in case of trouble. Initially, the protesters marched up and down the street carrying protest signs. Then male demonstrators went inside the store, and 10 of the young men sat down at the counter and refused to leave. At around 11:30 a.m., the 10 young men sitting at McCrory's lunch counter were arrested and taken to the city jail just some 100 yards behind the McCrory's store. The following day, the protesters were tried in the Rock Hill City Recorder's Court for trespassing. The protesters were represented by Chief Justice Ernest A. Finney, who now again represents the Friendship Nine, and who was our state's first African-American Supreme Court Chief Justice, and the late Matthew J. Perry, who became a United States District Court judge and for whom the federal courthouse in Columbia is named. All 10 of the protesters were found guilty and sentenced to a $100 fine or 30 days of hard labor at the York County chain gang. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People offered to pay the protesters' fine. Only one accepted this offer so he could benefit from an athletic scholarship. The remaining 9 refused to pay the fine and did serve their chain gang sentences at hard but useless labor. The Friendship Nine's strategy of opting for jail rather than paying their fine became known as jail, no bail. This strategy was effective not only to break the cycle of arrest, bail, and release, an expensive cycle, but also to bring national attention to the invidious nature of segregated public places and private commercial concerns open to the public in general. The Friendship Nine were joined by other defendants whose names are in the caption and have been named today, members of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. They came to Rock Hill in unity and solidarity with the Friendship Nine, and also, upon arrest, opted to remain in jail rather than pay their fine.
May it please the court, today I am honored and proud to move this honorable court to vacate the convictions of my clients, now known as the Rock Hill Nine. These courageous and determined South Carolinians have shown by their conduct and their faith the relief that they seek should be granted. Let the decision of the court today show the resolve of South Carolina to work together, to learn together, and to progress together, and to ensure the promises set forth in our Constitution, that all men are equal under the law.
The record is abundantly clear. There is only one reason these men were arrested. There is only one reason that they were charged and convicted for trespassing, and that is because they were black. That could not happen today. It was wrong then, it's wrong today. And these convictions, if they are allowed to stand, would be an offense to justice, and they must be vacated, and the charges must be dismissed. If this day ended without me, as a representative of the state, extending an apology to these men, we wouldn't be doing justice in this case, because these convictions and charges were had in the name of the state. And today, as solicitor for York County, I represent the state. So allow me to take this opportunity to extend to each of you my heartfelt apologies for what happened to you in 1961. It was wrong.
In conclusion, now is the time envisioned by Dr. King when he recognized and acknowledged that those who, like the Friendship Nine, sat down at lunch counters were in reality standing up for the best in America's dream and our most sacred values. We cannot rewrite history, but we can write history. Now, as to the Friendship 9, is the time and opportunity to do so. I therefore order that the defendant's motion for a new trial based on after-discovered evidence is granted. The defendant's convictions for trespassing in January of 1961 are vacated, null, void, and set aside. The record reflects no competent evidence supporting the charge of trespassing as to these defendants, so the charges based on the arrest of the defendants at McCrory's 5, 10, and 25-cent variety store in downtown Rock Hill for trespassing are vacated and dismissed with prejudice.
Thank you, Tony. I certainly appreciate that introduction, and Sylvia and I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you on this very, very special occasion, and to be a part of your community and to be here on this at this beautiful spot in this beautiful location. And so we are both very pleased to be here. It's been an opportunity for us to learn about all of the great things that you've done, and I compliment you on all of that. And I know that within each one of you, there's a story. There's a story about your own struggle for human rights and for your efforts to assist with others and how those efforts can collectively make a difference. And I really wish that I had time to hear those stories. But I'd certainly appreciate the opportunity to share our story with you tonight. The 1960s were tough times in our country. They were really tough times in the South, and they were tough times in Rock Hill, South Carolina. And what you see here is a picture taken in the early 60s on Main Street in Rock Hill. And look at what you see. A white mob gleefully taunting a black man, passive Rock Hill police officers. The black man in the front had just been hit with eggs. Segregation ruled the day, and the bitterness and division was evident everywhere you went. But the struggle for civil rights was underway. One of those struggles was the story of the Friendship 9 in Rock Hill. And as was said, this group of students, a group of young students, they marched the 1 mile from Friendship College up to Main Street in order to be able to protest at the lunch counter at the McCrory's variety store because they could not be served there. They were trained in the powerful act of peaceful protest, and so they were ready, but maybe not as ready as they thought they were. They were immediately arrested, and as soon as they sat down, they taken to jail, locked up, and spent the night there. Now, these young men were scared. They were very, very frightened. They spent the night in the jail, and they were taken to court the next day, as you heard earlier. Paying fines had become very costly to the civil rights movement, and it was basically about to bankrupt the civil rights movement across the South. And so they chose a pre-planned course of action, as was said, not to pay bail. And from that, they were found guilty. They refused to pay the bail. And from that, the jail, no bail movement began. And as a result of that, the local jails across the South began to fill up because others began to follow the lead of the Friendship 9. Now, as I said earlier, these young men were young students, 19, 20, 21 years old, and they were very, very frightened in the segregated Rock Hill, South Carolina, York County jail. They did not set out to be heroes, and yet they sparked a major milestone in the civil rights movement, which gave Rock Hill a platform from which to launch a series of events through the years. And they created a thread, if you will, from which we would carry on their core value, which was that all people are created equal and have equal rights. You're going to hear from Mac Workman, who recalls the fear of being locked up.
I had this nervous issue in my stomach, and I know it came from fear. You know, they call it butterflies, but I call it fear. After we was in the restaurant, and we were switched out of the restaurant to the jailhouse, and they put us in this cell. It's a sound that you never will forget if you've ever been incarcerated. And when they close that door and that key turn, you know you're in there.
Now, just like in this community, there are many, many people who participated in the process of assisting with the journey for civil rights. And I've chosen a few examples of that to share with you tonight. The first is in the upper left-hand corner, is a brother David Boone, who was a community activist and still is today. The gentleman in the upper right-hand corner is Sam Foster. Then you have a picture of the Friendship Nine. There's a picture of U.S. Congressman John Lewis on the bottom left, and then Mr. Elwin Wilson on the bottom right. Now, Sam Foster was an educational leader in our community, and he saw the opportunities to smooth the path for integration through education of all students. I was hired by Sam Foster to come to Rock Hill in 1971 as a young football coach. Sylvia and I signed a contract. We had not yet moved to Rock Hill. And on a Sunday afternoon, we drove from our home in western North Carolina into Rock Hill, and we got caught in a traffic jam. And as we made our way up in the traffic jam, lo and behold, it was a Ku Klux Klan rally. Now, I went to Sam Foster the next day and talked with him about this incident because Sylvia and I were not pleased about what we saw in Rock Hill at that time. Sam assured me of his sincerity to work to change the way our community functioned. And I believe very strongly in the way he expressed himself and the leadership he provided. Because what he said is that with every relationship, what we will do is we will create the kind of atmosphere in which people grow to love and appreciate each other. Sam served as a mentor to me through the years and is still a dear, dear friend. Our public education system in Rock Hill never saw any major issues in relationship to problems among the races. And I give Sam Foster a lot of credit for that. He went on to serve in the House of Representatives in South Carolina and provide leadership there, and he continues today to provide community leadership. This next gentleman is Brother David Boone. He's a young Catholic priest. He worked daily in the black community, and he saw opportunity within the city softball leagues to integrate play among black teams and white teams, and then later to pull together blacks and whites playing on the same team as a way of getting to know each other, even in an arena of competition. He's always been a quiet example of universal love, and he serves today as chair of the Rock Hill City Parks, Recreation, and Tourism Commission. He's deeply involved in providing opportunity for all people. In our history, as we've talked about, is the lunch counter and the Friendship Nine. And we keep coming back to it. That's why I mentioned before that this is a thread which kind of binds together our struggles for civil rights. In the early 1980s, downtown was undergoing redevelopment. And there was discussion about tearing down the McCrory's 5 and Dime. It was in bad disrepair. The counter was broken in many ways and had been set aside and so forth. But our community began to see the significance of preserving that counter and preserving that building and making it a part, as I said earlier, of our civil rights struggle and the history that we remember. The significance of that building being preserved and the counter was a major effort in our community. and again served as an indicator of the launching pad that it is for our struggles. We also, during that time, were able to get historic markers from the state of South Carolina placed in front of the McCrory's building to mark that spot. And the state markers were placed there on Main Street and marked that spot today forever. This is a shot of the dedication. There were over 1,000 people who gathered at the dedication of these markers. And you can see on the right, in front of the marker, are members of the Friendship Nine. And if you'll notice, just to the left is a white gentleman who happens to be Brother David Boone, smiling and enjoying the moment. We also instituted a Martin Luther King task force, much like you've used your task force here, to celebrate with a yearly interfaith breakfast, and also took other steps that were significant in awards and recognitions, like you're going to do tonight, to help keep the story alive. I sensed that our community was changing in many, many ways. In 2004, just like Tony was talking about, seeing a piece on the Friendship Nine on television, I'm watching television and quite by accident happened upon a documentary about John Lewis. And for those of you who don't know, John Lewis is a civil rights icon and a U.S. congressman from Georgia. And he fascinated me because he was a young man. And he was a young man like the Friendship Nine, who stepped forward and who was willing to lead and willing to accept the possibility of harm coming to them in many ways, and it did. But he enjoyed and he appreciated the aspects of a nonviolent protest. And so he saw that as a way to help gain social justice. The program mentioned a book that John Lewis had written, and I highly recommend it to you. The title is Walking with the Wind. And I had to have a copy of that book. And when it came, I began to read it right away to more fully understand the civil rights struggle. Now, as a part of his story, John Lewis's story, and this is him getting beaten up in front of the Edmund Pettus Bridge. As a part of his story, he began to describe in the book about his freedom rides. And lo and behold, he began to talk about his experiences in Rock Hill, South Carolina. My community, my place. And I was intrigued with what had happened to him there and how our community had treated him. He also, later I discovered, him mentioning Rock Hill again as he accepted the Profile in Courage Lifetime Achievement Award. And listen to his words.
40 years ago, I did what I thought was right when I went on the Freedom Rides in 1961. We wanted to test a Supreme Court ruling that banned segregation in interstate travel facility. When the bus arrived in Rock Hill, South Carolina, I got off the bus and approached a waiting room, marked white, waiting. We were being watched, and someone pointed to a colored sign. I said, I have a right to be here on the grounds of the Supreme Court decision. Second later, I was attacked, and the blood of another battle in the struggle for civil rights was drawn. I will never forget, ever forget that moment.
Well, I knew after listening to John Lewis and reading that book that I had to bring him to Rock Hill. I knew we were a different place, a better city, a better community. And we had to let him know that and to apologize to him. It took me 3 years to get on his schedule and bring him to our community. And a large, diverse, wonderful group, just like this, came that night, and it was a special occasion. And just before I apologized to John Lewis, I made this comment to the people of our city. As a community, we cannot erase that moment from our history in the same way that Congressman Lewis cannot erase it from his memory. But by remembering it and by continuing to take action on the journey of social justice, we will be following one of the insights of Martin Luther King, who said, "If we are to go forward, we must go back and rediscover those precious values that all reality hinges on moral obligation and foundation, and that all reality has spiritual control." This review of history was another defining moment for our community. When John Lewis was there, he wanted very much to meet with young people, just like your educational institute. Bring these young people along, because what he talked about is making sure that the battle and the struggle for civil rights was remembered in order to be able to move forward. And he wanted young people to have that story. He spent hours with young people. This is just one little group, talking about his book and signing the book and encouraging those students to move on. Representative Lewis came to the Martin Luther King breakfast, interfaith breakfast in Rock Hill in 2008. And his testimony in Rock Hill continued our community on a healing pathway. And another step forward was taken in the struggle for civil rights.
If someone had told me when I came to Rock Hill in 1961, or when I was beaten at the Greyhound bus station in Montgomery in 61, I had a concussion on that bridge in Selma in 1965, that one day I would be standing here as a member of the House of Representatives, elected by the good people of Georgia, black and white. I would say, "You're crazy, you're out of your mind. You don't tell me that we have not witnessed change. You don't tell me that we have not witnessed a nonviolent revolution. You don't tell me that we're not a better country, that we are a better people, and we are in the process of laying down the burden of race."
Now, the night before Congressman Lewis made that speech, I picked him up at his hotel to take him downtown to a reception attended by a large number of folks who had helped bring him there. We parked in front of the McCrory's building, and he walked up to the markers and stood there and read every word. And then he said to me, is this where the counter is? And I said, yes. And he said, "Can we go in?" And I said, "Sure, we can go in." The restaurant was open. So we go in, and there's no one sitting at the counter. It's about a dozen people in there eating, enjoying their dinner. John Lewis goes and walks to the middle of the counter. He places both hands on the counter and bows his head and does not move for at least 5 minutes. He sits right there. It was a moving experience. The whole restaurant was hushed. Not a sound was made. And once again, the Friendship Nine helped change the course of the civil rights movement. And that's what he said to me as he got up from the counter, that the Friendship Nine had done so much to help with the civil rights movement, and that they were heroes. And once again, what they had done and the counter became evident in our city as a cornerstone of a beginning of the struggle for civil rights. Now I want you to look again at this picture. This is the picture I showed you when we first started. It's an angry white mob. And then you will see that person. That's a young Elwyn Wilson, a self-proclaimed racist. He taunted the Friendship Nine and threw eggs at them as they were on their way to try to protest at the lunch counter. And as they walked to the counter at McCrory's in Main Street, they threw those eggs at them. And his life is an integral part of our story. But first, our most recent celebration that you've heard a lot about is the vacating of the Friendship 9 sentences. This took place at the Rock Hill Law Center. The sentences were vacated, not pardoned. They were not pardoned because the men had done nothing wrong. Each name of each person was called, and they stood just like they did in 1961. John Gaines, Thomas Gaither, Clarence Graham, Dub Massey, Robert McCullough, Willie McLeod, James Wells, David Williamson, Mac Workman, all sentenced for trespassing and were fined $100 or to spend 30 days in jail. Please note in this picture, and I'm sorry I can't point it to you, but I'll try to describe it to you. In the upper left, you'll see a white gentleman with gray hair sitting with his wife, who also has gray hair. That's Mr. Bill Spencer. Bill Spencer was the city prosecutor that prosecuted the Friendship 9. And in the bottom right-hand corner, as referred to earlier, is Supreme Court Justice Ernest Finney, who defended the Friendship 9 in 1961. And of course, those are Friendship 9 persons that you see there. This event brought international attention to our community, and as Tony said, to our knowledge, no other community has taken these kinds of steps. I wanted to show you this picture of Brother David Boone to show you how happy he was at that occasion. What a gentleman he is. And again, he serves in many ways in our community. The Friendship 9 event in 1961 was the platform from which our community began its struggle for racial justice. And their courage continues to inspire us today, and it will in the days ahead. And their retrial was another defining moment for our city. You saw Judge Hayes earlier, and he presided over this occasion. As was mentioned, his uncle was the original judge in July in 1961, and he gave the order to vacate the sentence. The prosecutor, Kevin Brackett, who you met earlier, mentioned there was only one reason that these men were prosecuted, and that's because they were black. And as Judge Hayes said so eloquently, we cannot rewrite history, but we can write history. It was a great day in our community.
Today is January 28th, and I am now signing the order, and that is done. Now,
Rock Hill is a different place today, but signs and markers and counters did not make it so. And we must look into the lives of the people and how those lives were changed and how their hearts were changed. But that's much easier to do today. And it is through people's lives and how they intersect that change occurs. Robert Kennedy said it well. Each time a man stands up for an ideal or acts to improve the lot of others or strikes out against injustice, he sends forth a tiny ripple of hope. And crossing each other from a million different centers of energy and daring, those ripples build a current which can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance. The examples I shared with you, one of Brother David Boone, all of these men helped build the pathway that we are on today. Brother David Boone was a minister, a community activist. Sam Foster, an educator, a legislator. The Friendship 9 students, real heroes, who turned out to be community leaders in the areas of education and law and in other areas. As the Friendship 9, John Lewis and Elwyn Wilson, who I mentioned earlier was a self-proclaimed racist. Carl Sandburg reminds us, very briefly, of why we're doing what we're doing, why we're trying to work to build what John Lewis called a beloved community, where there is respect for all people. And Sandburg wrote, "There's only one man in the world, and his name is all men. And there's only one woman in the world, and her name is all women. And there's only one child in the world, and it shall be called all children. And there's only one people in the world, and they are known as humanity." The summary of love and respect and reconciliation sought through so many struggles through the years comes from perhaps our least likely Rock Hill example, and demonstrates what Kennedy spoke of when he mentioned ripples of hope, and what Sandburg spoke of when he said only one people, and what this task force has said when it says every human has rights. In this segment, you will see our journey unfold, and you will feel its struggle, and you will know what healing and reconciliation looks like from our corner of the world, Rock Hill, South Carolina.
An unlikely reunion for these two men, Congressman John Lewis and Elwyn Wilson. They didn't even know the other's identity. They met, if you can call it that, 48 years ago. In very different times, in a blur of angry fists and proud protest. Lewis, then a freedom rider for Dr. King, arrived at the Rock Hill, South Carolina bus depot May 9, 1961, and was pummeled by Wilson, who for years has been working his way toward this moment.
I'm sorry for what happened down there.
Well, it's okay. It's all right. It's almost 48 years ago.
That's right.
Yeah. So remember that day well?
I try to get it out of my mind.
Did you ever imagine this moment?
I never thought that this would happen. It says something about the power of love, the power of grace, and the power of people to be able to say, I'm sorry.
I feel like I got saved out there.
Going back those 48 years, not easy for either of them.
We tried to enter a so-called white waiting room, and the moment we started through the door, a group of young men attacked us.
You helped beat up Representative Lewis.
Help. I didn't have no help.
It was you. It was all you.
Yeah.
There were so many incidents he now recounts with shame.
I had a black baby doll in the house, and I had a little rope, and I tied it to a limb and let it hang there.
You can see the glee on his face after he hit this man with an egg, fighting to keep blacks out of the local diner. Over the years, he'd revisit the diner, haunted, knowing he'd done wrong. One of his buddies, deeply religious, posed the question that would finally set his soul on a different course.
He said, if you died right now, do you know where you would go? I said, to hell.
And then, as Elwyn Wilson watched Barack Obama become president, something shifted in his heart.
Now, I didn't vote for him, but I'm glad he's there. And I've prayed for him.
And so for weeks now, Wilson has been apologizing all around town and then in Washington. The sudden transformation overwhelming to Wilson's son, Christopher.
He was really a hard person to deal with growing up. I always told him that, you know, we're all the same.
And what now?
I want to love people, regardless of what color.
A 5-decade journey from the evil of bigotry to the power of redemption.
We gather because we have chosen hope.
That, as much as any other change in our country, clearly answers the hopes of Dr. King and his followers.
For you to come here today and
It's amazing. Maybe others will come forth, and because there need to be this healing.
Well, just like I said, if one person comes forward and says the same thing I did, this is all worth it.
Good to see you, my friend.
Okay.
Good to see you.
Thank you for letting me share.